Okay, so you've seen the news. The S21 Ultra is making some major claims. The question is, have they fixed the focus issues from the S20 Ultra, and which smartphone camera takes the best photos and videos overall? My name is Jacklyn, and let's find out. So the S21 Ultra starts out strong here in this portrait mode test. I think that it did a really good job capturing the color of the scene. This was taken during blue hour, and you actually can't tell that on the iPhone 12 Pro image. The Pixel 5 went really to that blue tone, which you're gonna see a lot. The Pixel 5 tends to do that. It's a little bit too much. I think that the S21 Ultra meets in the perfect spot right in the middle. In this second shot though, I think that the Pixel 5 does a better job because the colors are a lot richer in that orange salt lamp. The S21 Ultra's image looks a little faded. There's not as much contrast in the salt lamp as I would have hoped for. The Pixel 5 has the most saturated image here, so it's definitely personal preference. This next one is an ultra-wide shot, and damn, they all actually did a really good job here. So the S21 Ultra has so many lenses on the back of it. It has two telephoto lenses, which I'll be testing, the ultra-wide lens, and the regular 108 megapixel lens. So this first shot was taken on the ultra-wide, and then I punched into the regular lens on all of them. And in this one, I feel like the Pixel 5 lacks a little bit of saturation here. The S21 Ultra definitely added in a little bit more of that blue hue, which is more representative of what it looked like outside when I snapped the shot. And then of course, I had to try zooming in. So on the S21 Ultra, you have 3x zoom and 10x zoom optically. So in between that, it uses digital, but I popped into 10 times and I noticed two main things. First of all, the image looks so much sharper than both the Pixel 5, which maxed out at 7x zoom, and the iPhone 12 Pro, which did 10x zoom. There's just a lot of detail there. The digital zoom on both the 12 Pro and the Pixel 5 cannot match an optical zoom. And the other thing is that the S21 Ultra has incredible stabilization. So when you're taking the photo, it actually will light up to indicate that it's stabilizing. And I noticed a huge difference in stabilization between this and the S20 Ultra from last year. And I'm actually gonna have a full camera comparison comparing the S21 Ultra and the S20 Ultra. So be sure to get subscribed so you don't miss it. But that's a big difference to me. And I think that this photo is amazing. And then the 100x zoom I also took. And for the first time ever, I think it's actually usable here. It has decent detail. And again, the stabilization made it easy to take that photo. So super impressive on that front. For nighttime photos, the pixel line is often like the line to look at for great nighttime photography, but I think that the balance may be shifting a little bit. The Pixel 5 is no longer like a flagship. It's a lot cheaper than both the S21 Ultra and the iPhone 12 Pro, so we can't expect it to compete at the same level. And I think that it didn't in this photo. The S21 Ultra sensor is just much better than the Pixel 5 sensor. So even though the Pixel 5 has incredible computational photography, it just can't compete with the detail that the S21 Ultra was able to pull out of this photo. I took this photo right around midnight, and I personally cannot see the trees in real life, so it's super impressive that any of them were able to get this type of detail. But the S21 Ultra's photo is just the sharpest with the least amount of grain, which is super impressive to me. One thing to note is that the iPhone 12 Pro, when I was actually taking the photo, showed me what the scene looked like a lot better than the Pixel 5 or the S21 Ultra. And I'll show you guys more low light stuff as we continue to go through. But I think we got to talk about focus enhancer right now, because the S21 Ultra has a lot to prove with its focus this year. The S20 Ultra from last year was plagued with this focus fringing issue, where basically the sensor was 108 megapixels and it was a big sensor with a really wide open aperture. And when you got close enough to a subject, you would have this focus fringing issue where only a small part of the subject was in focus. So the image ended up looking soft overall. And when Samsung came out with the Note 20 Ultra, they tried to remedy that by putting in a laser autofocus sensor. But a lot of it still comes down to the actual sensor that's taking the photos, that's really wide and has a fixed aperture. With the S21 Ultra, they're using a feature called Focus Enhancer. And basically what it does is it senses with AI if you're getting close enough to a subject where there would be focus fringing, and it switches you to the ultra-wide lens. Now when you're actually taking the photo, it doesn't feel like the photo gets much wider, but the way I can tell it's using the ultra-wide is because if you look in the metadata of the photo, it's at an f2.2 aperture, which is what the ultra-wide lens aperture is. Kind of interesting workaround. There are some issues with it where it looks like the image is a little bit more warped than it would on the regular primary sensor, but I think it's a really good solution that works a lot of the time. So in this photo, you can see that without it on, a lot of the image is out of focus, and it just like gives an overall soft appearance. And then with it on, everything is much more in focus. Even the wood on the floor is focused really well. And you can see on the iPhone 12 Pro, it didn't actually do that, and the photo actually looks really sharp, but on the Pixel 5, it didn't do it, and there are certain areas of it that are a little bit out of focus and soft. I took another outdoor shot of flowers, and in this one, you can see that the iPhone 12 Pro image universally is more in focus throughout, whereas the S21 Ultra's image on the bottom looks a little bit less in focus. In terms of colors, the S21 Ultra's is much more saturated and a little bit higher exposure. I think it looks slightly overexposed to me, whereas the iPhone 12 Pro has a little bit more contrast, and I think the exposure is more proper and true to life with what I actually saw in person. If you look at the grain in the background, the green is super different on the S21 Ultra. in comparison to the Pixel 5, but I think that the Pixel 5's color tone is actually a little bit more representative of the real scene. All right, this next one is an indoor portrait mode test, and there are 3 things to pay attention to here. First thing is that the Pixel 5 takes its portrait shots at around a 1.3 times focus distance and not natively with the 2x lens, which means that it looks a little bit wider in comparison to both the S21 Ultra and the iPhone 12 Pro. And you actually have the ability to switch in between lenses with both the iPhone 12 Pro and S21 Ultra. And initially they all look pretty good, but I think that the Pixel 5 added a little bit too much contrast to the image. It really made my hair very black and my shirt very black, and it feels like you almost lost detail because of how contrasty it is. That said, I think that there's a little bit more detail in my face in comparison to the S21 Ultra. I turned off skin smoothing, and it's definitely better than in the past. You know that I really rave about how bad skin smoothing is on the S20 line of phones. Feels like they've toned it down a little bit. Definitely there's more detail in my face, but I think that the skin tone's a little off. And what I do want to note here is that my hands are very red right now because I'm washing them a lot because of the pandemic. So they are more red than my face, but the skin tone between my face and my knee, it's just not consistent. I think it's a little bit too yellow on the S21 Ultra. It seems like on both the iPhone 12 Pro and the S21 Ultra, it focused on the drink console instead of my face. So my face looks a little soft in both of those, whereas the Pixel 5, it looks a little bit sharper. And then this is an indoor ultrawide test, and I think the important thing to note on this one is the noise in the frame. The S21 Ultra definitely has a lot more detail when you zoom in, and it looks a lot less noisy. The iPhone 12 Pro tries to reduce the noise by just like softening the overall image, and you can definitely see that when you zoom in on the pinball machine. And what would a camera comparison be without a selfie test? We gotta have it. I gotta say, the skin smoothing is, again, much better this year. Normally, Samsung would totally remove any blemishes that I have, and they didn't. They let them be, which is super interesting. And if you don't like that, you can of course turn on skin smoothing. It definitely is still a little smoother than the Pixel 5 and the iPhone 12 Pro, but it's much better this year. The one thing that Samsung still isn't perfect at is skin tone. It tends to go to a much more yellow pale hue than real life, which is not ideal. The iPhone 12 Pro in this one is a little bit too pink though, so that did not nail my skin either. And I think that the Pixel 5 is the most accurate skin tone. The S21 Ultra also has a 40 megapixel front-facing sensor that also uses pixel binning. So it has a lot more detail on my eyes and my eyebrows in comparison to the Pixel 5 and the iPhone 12 Pro. All right, another night mode test, and then we got to test out video autofocus. The only source of light was my computer in this room. All the other light was off. And interestingly, the iPhone 12 Pro does not have a night mode that you can just manually toggle like the Pixel 5 or the S21 Ultra. The iPhone decides when and when not to use it. So in this particular example, it did not use it, which actually was to its detriment because the Pixel 5 and the S21 Ultra are much brighter because they use their night mode. I think that the Pixel 5 is a winner here in terms of brightness. The guitar has a lot more detail in it, but the poster of the speaker, that is not the color that it actually is in real life. The S21 Ultra gets closer to the real color. I would still pick the Pixel 5 though, because I feel like just initially the brighter look is a lot more pleasing. So for video, the S21 Ultra, it's really fast and it's smooth. A lot of times you'll see jumpy autofocus with video. I think that the S21 Ultra has pretty natural focus shift. And it was able to quickly pick up what the subject of the scene was and adapt the focus. The iPhone 12 Pro and the Pixel 5 also have pretty good autofocus, but I think that the S21 Ultra is slightly better. This image may look like an absolute mess, but it's intentional. I wanted to see how the focus would work and the exposure, and the lighting was really harsh. It was just an overhead light from the ceiling leaning onto this. So you can see that the phone created a big shadow on the record, but I think otherwise all of these did a pretty good job. They all look pretty sharp. The S21 Ultra's image is slightly overexposed on the actual detail of the record player. I think that the iPhone 12 Pro's is the best here because the color of the center of the record player is actually the most accurate and true to life on the iPhone 12 Pro in comparison to the Pixel 5. I'm gonna have a lot of other samples in the S21 Ultra's review video, so definitely get subscribed if you wanna see that. If you wanna check out my full review of the Pixel 5, you can click right here. I'm gonna have another camera comparison coming very soon. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. I really appreciate you, and I hope you enjoyed it. I'll catch you next week. Bye.